Bud and Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hi, I'm Errol Laborde. Thanks for joining us. Marcia Cavanaugh is off tonight. In this the week when the legislature convened, we learn about what the priorities will be. Meanwhile, Tom Benson made owning a Cadillac dealership his latest priority. We'll be discussing these stories tonight, as well as ridding of traffic cameras, Louisianians ranked among the most distracted drivers, and our high-tech segment looks at the future of Children's Hospital. In our future are tonight's informed sources: Kurt Sprang, anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV, Channel 26; Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate; Kathy Finn, freelance business journalist and author of a book about Tom Benson; and Dawn Ostrom, our Future Watch reporter. And Stephanie, let's begin with you. Legislature convened this week. The governor made a speech to the legislature, as they always do on the first day. You wrote, though, of all the issues out there, and there are many, but one that doesn't get too far from him is Medicaid.
It was really interesting because he's got a very ambitious agenda for this session. He's going to take on tax reform, prison reform. We can talk about all that. But near the beginning of the speech, he took some time out to talk about Medicaid expansion. And he really does this pretty much wherever he goes. He talks about the fact that he decided to accept the Medicaid expansion that's part of the federal Affordable Care Act law. Bobby Jindal had not, and that at this point, 417,000 Louisianans have new coverage. He goes through a list of how many have gotten primary care for the first time in years, how many have been diagnosed with cancer, hypertension, things like that. And he talks about how much money it saves the state. And what was interesting to me about that is there's no pending legislation on this. This is not something the legislature is going to be addressing, but I think it's something he really just likes to remind people of for a couple reasons. You know, one is, I think it's very close to his heart. I mean, he's someone who really ran on this issue and, you know, clearly feels it's very important to provide health care with people. But it's also
and his mother was a nurse. His mother was a charity hospital
exactly,
nurse. Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, the other thing is it's very popular, even with Republicans. And there was a new poll out of LSU this week that showed that 72% of people in the state approve of Medicaid expansion, and that includes a majority of Republicans. And of course, he's the Democrat in a Republican state and is kind of getting hit by these Republican interest groups. So I think he also kind of likes to remind people that this is, you know, he's done something that's very popular and that is doing good.
Remind us again, what was Bobby Jindal thinking when he canceled Medicaid?
He was thinking about the White House. He was thinking that...
But why would that get anybody to the White House?
Well, because it was part of Obamacare, that's why. And because he was looking to run in the Republican primaries, and the kind of hardcore Republican point of view is that Medicaid anything associated with the Affordable Care Act was bad, but Medicaid expansion specifically was not something that we should be spending money on. That it's, you know, part of the provision. It's very good for states because initially states got 100% of the amount, you know, not what they were paying before.
The states have to pay more of it, right? Isn't it?
Not more, not a majority. They have to pay some of it. So we basically lost that 100% period because it was the first 3 years, but it's going to work its way down to 90%. So you still get 90% versus 10%, but he really focused on the 10%, and also the fact that maybe the kind of publicity of the expansion would attract some people who would qualify under the old rules, and it would end up costing more. So it was a cost and philosophy-based argument, but it really wasn't a winning argument in the broader population, as I think this poll shows. And, you know, Governor Edwards obviously is a Democrat, but there are a number of Republican governors around the state who have expanded Medicaid. John Kasich is one who ran for president, and were very concerned when Congress was looking at overturning the law that they would lose that Medicaid expansion. So it's turned out to be probably, you know, everyone's still talking about the exchanges, and there are still real problems. That's the private exchanges. But the Medicaid expansion, I think, has turned out to be a real success, and a lot of people feel that way.
Now, another popular program is TOPS, the scholarship program. Where does that stand now?
Well, you know, everybody talks as if they will be able to fully fund it in the future. They certainly hope to. But this is the first year they did not fully fund it, so students got kind of a surprise bill. I think legislators started to take ideas to curtail it a little bit more seriously than they have in the past. Now that people have faced the reality that their award might not be there, it might not be there in full. So there are some proposed bills. There's one kind of coalition behind a bill by Gary Carter of New Orleans that would introduce a need-based element, basically say that, if you cut it back, the people, lower income people have a better chance of getting their full awards. Because the idea is to help people who wouldn't otherwise be able to go to college go. There are other bills that look at raising the academic cutoffs. And there are always a whole bunch of ideas, some people say you should, full awards to people who, upperclassmen, there are always variations on it. But I think the debate will probably be more serious this year just because people get it. That I think it's unlikely. If the governor gets everything he wants, it sounds like they might be able to fully fund it, but he's probably not going to get everything he wants. So.
And the big bear in the woods this year, and I guess probably every year, is tax and the tax structure. I know a lot of
this
people
is very
saying
much connected to that, yes. And in pushing, as the governor has pitched his tax plan, which actually involves additional revenue, he has said tops, 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 like that's what's at stake. He reminds people, maybe not as often as he talks about Medicaid, but almost as much. So the governor has a plan. It's kind of a complex plan. It's interesting, it actually involves tax cuts for a number of middle-class people, for most middle-class people really, but it involves raising taxes on businesses and a new particular tax on business that the legislation hasn't been filed. They're still working on the details. So it's really going to turn out to be, I think, a big battle between Democrats, Republicans, business, and then the more populist wing of, John Bel Edwards support. And he's really hoping, I think, to talk directly to voters, and because the business lobby is very strong. Income tax, for example.
As he is when he's talking to Medicaid. That's something that resonates with voters.
It's going to be tough, and I think all eyes are on House Republicans, because over in the Senate you have. The Senate's pretty friendly to John Bel Edwards, even though it's majority Republican. It's headed by John Alario, a former Democrat who is really just a master of the Senate. He really has the trust of the senators, but he also has the trust of the governor. And I think he really will try to work to either get what the governor wants or something acceptable. On the House side, it's different. There's the House majority Republican. There's a Speaker, Taylor Barratt, but there are also some even more conservative players, Lance Harris, the GOP caucus chair, Cameron Henry, the appropriations chair, who, are going to be more hardliners. There's a guy named John Schroeder, who's a St. Tammany Parish representative running for treasurer. He's the one who sponsored the bill that set up the Blue Ribbon Tax Commission that was supposed to hand down the plan that everybody would accept. Now that it's been handed down, they don't accept it, and he's out there talking about spending cuts. Okay. There's a big group that doesn't want to spend money. It's going to be a big fight.
Well, another piece of legislation out there that it may not be the most important, but it's one that certainly arouses passions among people. I know, Kurt, you've been looking at it. This is a proposal to do away with those traffic cameras.
Yeah, this is one that certainly makes people perk up when you talk about it. And this is the bill pitched by State Representative Paul Hollis, and if that sounds familiar, that last name, his father was the late Ken Hollis, the state senator in Metairie. Paul Hollis is in Covington. He is sponsoring House Bill 257, which would create a constitutional amendment and would prohibit the installation and the use of automated speed enforcement devices or the use of them to collect fines. And so we all know how much those are become a part of our lives for so many people, where we have to watch out where we're going, right? Because this would be a constitutional amendment, it requires a 2/3 vote, as I understand, in the state legislature by lawmakers to get it out and get it on the ballot. It's a simple majority, though, for voters, as I understand. And Hollis hopes to have it on the ballot in October. He has a history of not liking these speed cameras. In fact, a couple years ago, he tried to get a bill passed that if you were driving in New Orleans and you got a traffic cam ticket, but you're from Jefferson, you wouldn't have to pay it because you don't live where the camera is. So that didn't even get out of committee. He says this is looking pretty good, though. He says that these cameras, he's been pretty adamant that they're about money. He feels they're not about safety. But New Orleans would take a pretty good hit if this becomes a law, and if voters would approve it as well in October. I think it's last year the city made $16 million from these cameras. They added, what, 50-something more?
The signs are going up all over town. Like
And
right
10
now.
of them are mobile,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So they're the cars that could be anywhere. So if I always forget which is it Henry Clay that has one? So I take Nashville. Is that?
Yeah.
Henry
is that-
Clay has one.
Yeah, and so I
Notorious,
take
yes.
Nashville instead, right?
We've already altered our habits. But
Well,
not
now
already.
they're going to put
Exactly.
the mobile one could be on Nashville and could get you there too. All right. So in New Orleans, I think projects to make $24 million from them
Isn't there
next
also
year.
a bill that may go forward in terms of what kind of signage needs to be around those cameras if they do go up?
Oh, I don't know, but I can tell you this: if this goes up there, the cameras won't be there, except. Because I asked him, will anybody be allowed to be grandfathered in? And he says there is one community, Lafayette has the cameras, but one community outside Lafayette where voters already voted to allow the cameras. And because voters already said we want the cameras, he would allow them to keep them.
But could we get out of those tickets because we don't live there?
I don't know.
Well, some of those rural communities,
Speed traps.
yes, speed traps are like your leading
Yeah.
source of income, so
Yeah.
they would need them.
But listen, there are a lot of people who like the cameras. People who have them on their streets and are tired of cars speeding up and down their streets. Say,
New
"Look,
Orleans the New Orleans ones are around school zones, so that was the pitch the mayor made, that it really is a safety issue, although it's also a revenue issue.
Well, the other bill that I don't know who is sponsoring it would just, so it's not a secret. Like there
Yeah.
is a camera here. Give
Yeah.
people fair warning. We'll see where that one
Yeah.
goes.
Well, Kathy, Tom Benson seems full speed ahead with buying things. Last week was the rumor that he was going to buy into Dixie Beer. Now comes the report that he's buying a Cadillac dealership. What's going on?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of fun to see him doing all of these things because you thought, after the last couple of years of this terrible fighting with his family in court over his estate, you kind of would think that he would just, after settling up the disputes with them, that he would just take a long vacation and be free of it. But I learned in writing a book about Tom Benson, one of the first things I learned was that this man just thrives on doing deals, and so he's just staying at it. And he's going to turn 90 in July, but he's still doing the deals. And we just heard that he is buying Cadillac of New Orleans, which is based in Metairie. He, of course, already owns 2 dealerships. He owns
This goes back to his roots as a car dealer.
It
That's,
does.
that's
Yeah.
where he started.
That's where he
yeah.
started. That's where he made his money in the first place, in New Orleans and San Antonio. And he still had 2 dealerships here in New Orleans. Even after settling the family disputes, he held on to the 2 dealerships, Best Chevrolet and Mercedes-Benz in New Orleans, in Metairie actually. And he'd had both of those for many years. And so, but it's really interesting to see him suddenly buying another dealership. And I guess about the second thing I thought about this was, would we in a few years be seeing the Cadillac Louisiana Superdome? Because, the Mercedes-Benz contract was a 10-year contract on the Superdome. And I believe it expires in 2021 or right around that time.
You know what? Y'all heard it first here.
That's right.
This is going to happen. This is going to happen.
And since Mercedes-Benz, of course, has since signed a deal in Atlanta on the brand new stadium there, so that they have the naming rights now on 2 stadiums, and I would say it's probably unlikely that they will retain that once the New Orleans contract expires. It's interesting if you look at what's happened with Cadillac in the past couple of years. They've taken a very similar route to Mercedes-Benz. They've their whole brand has changed. They've taken a new tack. They're going with innovation. They want a younger look. They're going for a younger vibe and an affluent. It's not your father's Cadillac. And so it makes sense in a lot of ways. They've done a lot of European styling with their cars, and it's a different Cadillac than it used to be. And so it's not hard to think that they might look at something like that down the road, and maybe Tom was thinking about that too when he did this deal. I don't know, but it's interesting in any case. It's kind of fun to see him doing these deals.
When the final settlement came with the family, not everything was revealed. I mean, it seemed like obviously the parties were satisfied.
Actually, nothing was revealed.
Okay. But as someone who's watched this, does this indicate to you that Tom Benson's on safe territory now and he really doesn't have to worry about that lawsuit anymore?
Yeah, kind of, yes. I mean, I think, as I said, he's doing deals, and that's a good sign. The fact that he's putting money out there. He did just sell WVU-TV, and I think that was not surprising. He had a management contract with Raycom, which he signed in 2013. There may well have been an option in that contract that said Raycom could buy the station at some future point under certain circumstances. We don't know that. He sold the station, by one report that I saw, he sold it for perhaps $52 million, which was right around where the valuation that he had placed on it in court documents when all of the settlement was coming down. So he seemed to get a fair price for it and a good jump from what he paid for it in 2008. And then there was the thing about Dixie Beer, and I think that was kind of to offset the fact that he was perhaps selling the station, and local ownership was going out of town once again on the station. But to see him doing a deal for the Cadillac dealership is quite interesting to me. And also, they keep dangling out the possibility, over the past couple of years, it was more than strongly rumored that he was going to buy the Freeport-McMoRan building, which is right across from the Superdome, across Poydras, and which, of course, would be probably for sale at a good price because Freeport-McMoRan has kind of fallen on financial hard times. I think that deal is still out there and still alive, and Greg Bensel at Saints headquarters keeps dangling out the probability that more big things are coming from Tom Benson.
Okay, well, another force showing a lot of ambition in the community next to Tom Benson is Children's Hospital, which is building its own empire. You've been looking into the future for Future Watch of Children's Hospital. What have you learned?
This is all about the expansion to the actual, not the other facilities Children's Hospital manages, but Children's Hospital itself, the site at Tchoupitoulas and Henry Clay. A couple years back, Children's Hospital acquired the old New Orleans Adolescent Hospital campus, which was originally an Army barracks, and it's between Henry Clay and State Street, south side of Tchoupitoulas by the river. All these old brick buildings, historic buildings. Children's Hospital took over that whole campus. We do have an image to show, and it's showing from State Street towards Henry Clay. It's going to be one whole big facility that's all kind of intertwined. And there's a new parking garage. There's a new sky bridge that connects that parking garage. What it's going to do to Children's Hospital, I'm told, is really kind of not necessarily expand the hospital in terms of patient care, but right-size the hospital. As technology advances and there are all these new machineries and equipment, they actually need more space for some of the technology. They are taking the parking weight off the neighborhood there and moving it into a parking garage. They've been test pile driving for the last week or so behind those brick fences that you can't see into. They will be officially pile driving in the next 2 weeks to start construction of the parking garage. They will also expand the cardiac ICU. There will be a new operating room. But one of the biggest things that's changing, as Hogs for the Cause happened a couple weeks ago, you heard a lot or saw a lot in the press about the Hogs House, and this is the privately funded, raised money through Hogs for the Cause facility for families that are dealing with cancer. They'll have a place it's similar to a Ronald McDonald House kind of concept, that a family that's long-term hospital care has a place to stay. Doesn't have to go all the way downtown to a hotel, doesn't have to sleep in the hospital room with the child every single night. They have some space. But throughout the whole facility at the old adolescent hospital, there's child life space. There's place for family to have internet access and some relaxation. There's some play space. So it's more just bringing the whole facility up to date. The facility is really a boon to our area. They see close to 8,000 admissions, not patients, admissions every single year, and 150,000 outpatients from all over the Gulf South. And now they're incorporating this historic site at the foot of Henry Clay and Tchoupitoulas into their facility. Every single exterior of brick buildings on that site will be touched and updated and made sure they're safe. They will not be renovating all the buildings yet. There's room for further expansion. But this current project, which is officially kicked off now, will be finished in 2020. It will cost $225 million, and the funds are in to pay for it.
I was talking one time to a guy who was a career fundraiser, and he was envious of Children's Hospital. He says Children's Hospital is always the best in the community at raising funds.
I was there yesterday for a minor surgery for one of my children, outpatient surgery, and I went home and said to my husband, everybody there is just happy. And I don't know whether it's because they're dealing with kids all day. There's no other workplace you walk into where everybody's just happy and friendly and kind, and maybe it's because they're so happy and friendly and kind, they can say, can you give us some money, please? And people do. So, but that's what the construction is uptown when you see it. It is expanding and right-sizing the hospital.
Less friendly sometimes are people who are driving, and there's a study out, Kurt, that actually ranks. Somebody thought it'd be a good idea. Let's rank every state in terms of the most distracted drivers, and lo and behold, Louisiana came out first. Why? Why are we distracted?
Well, we came out 50th on the list, as in the most distracted.
The most, okay so.
But it was bad. Let's just put it that way. You know, this is one of those issues, though. If you've got a room full of people, and you said, okay, if you've ever texted while driving, raise your hand, and a bunch of hands would go up, and some wouldn't. And then your next question would be, how many of you lied about the last question? And the rest of the hands would go up, right? Well, this is a study that was done by a group that works with insurance companies and the like. And April, by the way, is Distracted Driver Awareness Month. But turns out we Southerners are the most distracted regionally. 41%, according to the study, 41% of our trips, we're texting or doing some kind of distracted driving. However, Louisiana ranked the worst out of all the states, 50th for distracted driving. And, you know, we all think, well, the problem is going to be you're talking on your phone and you look up and you've hit somebody, right? That's, you know, worst case scenario. But the study says it's other things as well, that it's a fast acceleration because you weren't paying attention and you had to hit the gas, or a fast, sudden turn. Things like that can also affect what people around you are doing, and it also part of the problem. Also this week, same week, the Louisiana Highway Safety Commission called distracted driving a dangerous epidemic in between 2011 and 2015. In that time period, 192 people died in Louisiana because of distracted driving issues. Sometimes the distraction was inside the car, sometimes it was outside the car. AAA previously released statistics saying 60% of teenagers involved in accidents, there's some sort of distracted driving going on in there as well. And so what do you do about it, right? Well, MAD has, for years now, tried to put together those little performances that they do at schools where they bring the smashed up car and they try to convince the kids don't drive. You know, the state of Louisiana was last year increased the penalties for texting while driving up to $500 for your first offense, and I think it could go up $1,000 a pop after that. You could have your license suspended, and we can't go through school zones anymore, even holding a phone. Can't even hold the phone in your hand during school zone hours. But if you talk to all the people who are involved in this, they'll say that despite all this stuff, all the fines, all the laws, the problem isn't going to get any better until people change their behaviors.
But why are we so much worse than everybody else?
That's a great question.
Because the distraction exists in Massachusetts and Montana,
the
too.
people like in Colorado, they're driving in mountains. In mountains, you got to pay attention. We got flatland. We're boring. What I want to know is, did the people who conducted the survey, did they distract our drivers when they were finding out if they're distracted or not?
Right.
We'll have to wait to find out the answer to that question, though, because we got to talk to Kathy about. Actually, it's kind of related about tech. Okay. There's a big high-tech conference coming to New Orleans. Does this mean that New Orleans is getting respect as a tech center?
I think our respect for the city as a tech center or a tech hub, let's say, has been growing, of course, over the last decade or 15 years. It doesn't mean we've reached the epitome, of course, but the conference we're talking about is called Collision. And it's a big national conference that's going to be held in New Orleans in early May. And this is the second year that the conference has occurred here. This is actually the North American version of an international conference that's held every year in Portugal. That's called a Web Summit. And so this is the North American version of it. 2 years ago, or the year before last, a guy named Chris Schultz, who is a co-founder of a business accelerator called Launchpad here in New Orleans, convinced the Collision founders, to move the conference from Las Vegas to New Orleans, which was a big deal. And of course, I'm sure it helped that it falls between the 2 weekends of Jazz Fest. That's always a good draw for a conference like this. But it is a big deal. They expect perhaps 20,000 people at the conference. It gives a lot of attention to the city. It brings in innovators. It's a matchmaking conference to some extent with entrepreneurial startups getting matched up with venture capital and that sort of thing. It's also a kind of a trade show. It's displaying new technologies, including in music and entertainment and that sort of thing. So it's a big deal for bringing big names to the city. I think, I always like to remind people that even though we're getting a lot more attention for tech and for entrepreneurial startups and that sort of thing, none of this rivals our major industries, oil and gas, tourism, the maritime industry, in terms of the jobs and just the sheer power of their industrial power. But tech is coming on strong, and New Orleans is being regarded more and more as a center for not only technology innovation, but for supporting entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial startups. So this sure doesn't hurt.
And we're still a city that's regarded as a fun city to move to, and
it still has a real cool factor.
And comparatively inexpensive to other places, so it's a place that you want to go. So would this be the new Orleanian that we hear so much about that's doing this?
Yeah, it would. It actually would. Where it's like the Silicon Valley without the cost, because it is, even though it's getting more and more expensive for young people to move here and to buy houses and that sort of thing, it doesn't come close to comparing with Silicon Valley, with San Francisco and other tech centers. So we still have the cool factor going for us, which we've had kind of since in the post-Katrina years. It became a real place where young people like to come and wanted to try it out and see it as a very original kind of city that doesn't look like other places and doesn't feel like other places. And so that helps, because people who innovate and people who start up their own businesses like that feeling, and they like to be around other people who feel that way. So New Orleans still has it.
Well, let's look into more of the immediate future. Kurt, some of the things we should be looking at, Kurt.
Well, if you're tired of driving in one lane on South Claiborne through the Holly Grove and Uptown area, as I understand it, the new road there, after the drainage work has been completed, it's striped. They're going to put some grass seed on over the weekend or to the start of next week. The city's going to come inspect it, and then that job, in the matter of days, is going to be done.
Oh, so we're going to scratch one more off. Okay. Stephanie.
Up in the legislature, they're going to be looking at maybe expanding sales tax to some new areas, services, things like that. But J.P. Morrell, the senator from New Orleans, has a bill to remove sales tax from diapers and sanitary products. So keep an eye out for that. That's really part of a national movement on the theory that these are necessities like food and utilities, other things exempt from sales tax. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation to hear some of these senators talk about the topics.
Kathy?
Well, I'm going to keep my eye on Tom Benson to see what comes next. We keep hearing these hints that something big is going to come from the Benson headquarters very soon. I'm keeping my eye on the Freeport-McMoran building. I still think that's going to be involved somehow. We'll see.
Okay. Dawn?
As we sit here, the LSU Tigers are competing for the national title in gymnastics. It's on ESPNU right now. It's a really dynamic team with Mary Lou Retton's daughter, a British Olympian, the National Collegiate Gymnast of the Year, Ashley Natt. It's a lot of fun to watch, and it would be a huge win for Dee Dee Bro, their 40-year-long coach. So.
Wow, okay. Very interesting. Well, now we can take off and enjoy the rest of the weekend, a holiday weekend. Hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us, and see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.